Council. This evening, we will be meeting in council committees. The meeting will be called to order by the City Council President, who will then pass discussion over to a respective committee. The chair of the committee will introduce the discussion topics and provide an overview of the issues at hand. If needed, members of the administration will offer brief statements to provide further context. We will then welcome input from the community. Any citizens who wish to speak will be asked to state their name and address, both verbally and on the sign and sheet located at the podium. Individuals will be given one opportunity to share their thoughts, and the committee chair will have the authority to limit each speaker to 3 minutes. Once all citizens have had the opportunity to speak within the 15-minute time period allotted for total public participation on each topic, the public comment portion will be closed. Council committee members will then continue their deliberations. There may be additional questions directed to the administration during this time. When the discussion on the topic concludes, the chair will indicate whether legislation will be introduced at the next regular session of council and move on to the next item on the agenda or adjourn the committee if their work is complete. The next committee chair will then call their committee to order, proceeding in the same manner as before. Once all committees have adjourned, City Council will conclude for the evening.
Good evening. It's 7:02 p.m., May 27th, 2025. This is a meeting of Athens City Council. We are meeting in committees tonight. We have 3 committees that will be meeting. We will have the Committee of the Whole, which will represent all members of council, the 6 members that are present tonight. Then we'll go on to Finance and Personnel Committee with 2 topics. And then we'll go into Planning and Development Committee with 1 topic. So we will start with the Committee of the Whole. So all members of council will stay at the dais. And we will talk about the new fire station additional funding. Is there any member of council who would like to lead the discussion? Or shall I turn it over to the administration? Okay. Would the administration care to discuss this?
Thank you, Member Reisner. All of you should have received last Friday a fairly extended email from me that described the situation that I'm asking you to consider this evening. And this is specifically about additional funding required to complete payments under Project 346, which is the new fire station headquarters project. Right now, we owe Pepper Construction the final payment for that project, and that payment is roughly $931,000. As you are aware, there was a theft incident that I think you all have received updates on from both generally from the administration, from things in the press, as well as public records releases and additional information that my deputy Andrew Chicky has provided for over time, kind of talking about the extent to which we've tried to address and recover those funds and pursue those funds. But we're to the point now that Pepper is basically done. They're through the punch list. They are working on some warranty items, but those warranty items are not a reason to hold any more funds back. So we're at the point where we need to go ahead and make payment, and we don't have enough money with the bond proceeds to make the final payment. And so what I'm asking you to do is increase the authorization by roughly $932,000, and the exact amounts are in that email there, and we'll have it updated in the ordinance when it's presented to you next week. And the place we intend to take this from is several different locations. So roughly $350,000 will come from the 206 fund. And what that money came from are two places. One is about $150,000 in interest that has been made on cash that remained in the city's accounts from the bond proceeds while the construction project was going on. So that 206 fund, the Public Safety Capital Fund grew during the period of time we were building the project because of that interest. And then the other $200,000 there came from a check that we actually just received today from the insurance company for $200,000 in insurance claim proceeds. The additional roughly $582,000 we propose to take out of a couple different locations. Only $30,000 of that will be new appropriations. In all other cases, we're seeking to use money that we appropriated for other things in this year's budget. We thought it fiscally prudent rather to do that rather than to seek new appropriations. And so we're proposing to have $500,000 from the CAP fund. And then ask for an additional $30,000 appropriated into the CAP fund for a total of $530,000 from CAP Fund 580. Additionally, we'll take $27,000 from 101-208 TC 200. That's the fire department operating budget for the year, and then $25,000 from 101-120 TC 200, and that's the other admin operating budget for this year. And basically just reallocating those funds in order to make up that additional $582,000. And then we'll just tighten the belt on several activities that we otherwise would have done out of those couple funds this year. As I noted in the email, a couple other points. I think you've seen the news and you've seen the efforts that we've made to recover the $350,000 that we have roughly frozen in a bank account in Kentucky that appeared to be the illicit proceeds from the theft. However, if you followed the litigation in that particular case, there's another victim basically, and so we're waiting on the court to make a decision about how to allocate those funds back to the various victims that were defrauded. And I have no idea how long that will take. You know, litigation can conceivably take a very, very long time. And so at this point, you know, Pepper's done and we need to go ahead and get payment. If we get any of that money recovered, and I'm hopeful that we will, you know, at least half, if not more, should come to the city of Athens specifically because we were the ones that chased and found it. I think that, you know, my initial recommendation would be to put that into the 430 fund, which is the debt fund for the paying debt on the bond. If there's enough revenue coming in to that fund by that time, and we've had a little bit of time to watch it and see that the revenue coming into that fund is enough to cover the debt service, then I would recommend that instead of it going back into 430, that we would remit it to the 580 fund to replace some of the capital money that we're taking to put towards this endeavor. So I think we'd cross that bridge when we got to it, and I think it'll be a little while before we see any proceeds from that endeavor. Finally, and I included this in the last paragraph, the last paragraph roughly or second to last paragraph of the email, and specifically, you might ask if we had $722,000 stolen, why am I asking for an additional authorization of $932,000 roughly? So roughly $210,000 more. And ultimately, we had some costs grow throughout the project and some decisions that we made throughout the project while we were doing this project that we thought were beneficial to the citizenry. And you know, most notably the additional fairly large parking lot to support the athletic field that is adjacent to the fire station. That was not part of the original project, and we decided that would be an appropriate to get done while we're in there. The fitness court, or at least the city share of the fitness court that went in there, the art walk, and then ultimately you could say that conceivably the land purchase was for more than just the fire station, and because a significant portion of that has to be retained as green space that can be used for other public benefits. So we see that those additional costs ultimately added up over the course of the project, and that's why we're asking to wrap up with this additional authorization of roughly $932,000. That's all I have, and certainly can answer your questions.
Member Clotfelder?
Director Stone, I really want to thank you for being so resourceful about how to find appropriated funds rather than getting us some more debt. Thank you very much, because I'm sure what you just read took many, many hours of careful consideration, so thank you for that. I am curious if I'm not sure I can be as articulate as you just were about the figures, but there's money that's going to come out of the capital budget for this purpose, and if we get that 300 or even part of that $350,000 back from that potentially shady bank, it won't go back in the capital fund, if I understood you correctly. So at least that's not the top priority for it. So is the reduction of the capital fund by, I think, about $500,000 going to negatively affect our ability to do any of the other projects that were planned for this year?
Member Cloudfelter, thank you for that question. And ultimately, we can remit those recovered funds to a couple different places because a couple different places will have been used to spend money on the fire station project. So, ultimately, it's the desire of this body as to where to put back those funds. Our initial recommendation is just because we want to make sure that we can service the debt, is to put them into the debt fund. That basically the income tax revenue that is coming in from the public safety capital levy is providing funds into that debt fund that then we use to make the debt payment. If it looks like we're bringing in more revenue than is necessary to service the debt year after year, then at that point, maybe it would be appropriate to, instead of it going into that location, to go into the 580 fund, which is just general capital that we can use pretty much for anything. What we tend to use that general capital for is large one-time building purposes that don't have other or repairs or projects that don't really have another source. We try to stay away from using that for any type of proprietary activity like water or sewer or parking garage, because they have their own funds that come in that we can do. But, if there was a repair to this building, for instance, or, in the past we've used it for purchasing fire apparatus, although, ideally we would use the public safety levy, though a lot of that is going to be used to service the debt on the station. So to answer your question, that was like a long answer to a rather short question, but there's not something else planned for that. One of the reasons that I put that $500,000 into the budget this year was I was, going to ask you at some point probably to transfer it to the CIC so that we could use it to get across the finish line of the Armory, but we used that special revenue fund instead because we made the determination that we needed to get those spent by the end of 26, or else we had the risk of losing them. So, so that $500,000 that was in the annual budget in 580 is really unspoken for. It's not to say that a need wouldn't creep up, but right now it's not. And so we thought, since it was already in this year's budget, and wasn't going after more debt, we thought that would be a go ahead and an appropriate use for the.
Okay, thank you.
Another question?
Just a brief follow-up. Are you saying that through that special revenue fund that the Armory project now has all the money that it looks like it's going to need?
I'm about 90% sure that it does. So one of the issues that I think we tried to articulate when we made that request is a lot of the money going into the Armory project are grants that are reimbursement grants, and we can't we can't get a bill and then request the money from the granting agency. And there are about 8 different funding sources on that Armory, so it's pretty complicated, and then wait for the money to come in and then pay the bill. They actually, the granting agency requires us to show proof of payment. Most significantly is the Jobs Ohio one, and that's one that, but also the ARC grant as well. Both of those require proof of payment, and then, and so we asked for that money to come over to kind of help us manage the cash flow issue with it. However, I do think we'll probably have some needs a little bit beyond the amount of money that the grants would provide, and I think this will make the delta basically. So I'm about 90% sure that should get us to the end of the Armory project and get that open.
Okay, thank you.
Member Wood.
So if I understand, Capital 580 is normally for large building projects. What replenishes that? And what normally goes into it? And how long will it take us to replenish it?
Sure, thank you, Member Wood. So the capital fund is funded by a percentage of the income tax mix. And I think right now it's 3%. Of the income tax mix. And so after you take the designated levies off the top of the income tax that comes in, 3% of that's remaining goes into the capital fund, and it grows over time.
Auditor, you have a comment?
Couple things. I just want to add that the auditor's office, me, and Leanna worked with Andy to come up with the funds we're going to take this money for. The original ask was to borrow money, a short-term loan, about $600,000 to pay that back. That was not something I was willing to go along with. And so we found the money, and part of it is that $500,000 that was in the capital fund. Currently, it gets 2% of the 85% of the tax dollars that we take in right now.
And I'm sorry, how much is that normally? What's the normal inflow? Does it just grow every year if we don't use it? Has it been,
Yes.
like, what's the balance of it now?
I don't know if I brought that report.
I can look. It'll take me a second to pull it up.
Yeah. Well,
That's not really the same, though, is it? Yeah.
what's it say for unappropriated?
The monthly fund reports that you all get show those balances, but I will pull those up here. But if you wanted to refer to it later.
Do you have it? The balance, cash balance in the 580 fund at the end of the year was about $981,000. So that's why they were able to appropriate $500,000 for use, as their budget throughout the year. So right now, that's still in there. And so I can't tell you how long it took us to get to that amount, but, I mean, tonight I can't. I will be able to tomorrow.
Unencumbered, it's about 769.
Right.
Okay.
It's end of April.
Continue.
My other question here, I can't help but notice there are projects that are added that we believe are necessary and beneficial. I'm curious, were those approved by council? Did those ever come up to us? That's a lot of money to just spend.
Individually, no. But collectively, as part of the 346 project, I would contend that they were part of the larger project. If you'd like to go back and undo them, I don't know that I can, per se, or if you don't approve of the art, for instance, I know that there's a 1% for art provision with our projects, and so we really tried hard on this particular project to deliver art, and there's an ordinance that supports that. I think that, by and large, all of these were within the general intent behind this project, particularly given the early project development phases when we talked about, creating a space that was not just a fire station headquarters, but also was a community asset.
I mean, I'm just going to point out, intent or no, it's our job to approve those funds, and if those were spent without our approval, then that's a pretty big deal. And if things were just approved for another $210,000, I mean, that's a lot to just decide to spend. I don't know what recourse there is, but that's a pretty large sort of executive decision.
Let me interject this. The Service Safety Director mentioned the 1% for art. That was part of an overall ordinance that was passed several years ago that basically said that whenever the city committed itself to a large project, I think at that time it was like the wastewater treatment plant, that a percentage of that amount that was going to be appropriated for whatever it was, 1% would go to public art. And that's there. Okay, so if that's what it was spent for, then it's been approved. It was approved by previous council, and it's still valid until it's repealed. So I don't know if that 1% covers all of this or not. I have to get my calculator and figure it out, but I think that's part of it is. Okay.
Comment and possibly a couple of questions. Thank you, Member Wood, for pointing out the question about when we add to projects. I noted that we do have a lot of those priorities reflected in the comprehensive plan, including looking for opportunities to enhance green space for public use and such. So I'm sure, and especially with the concerns we have about our fund in general, recognizing we're not talking about the general fund here, but I can take from Member Wood's comments that in the future, if there's a big piece of the project that's not built into the initial cost, maybe there'll be more dialogue at council. But I also wanted to ask, in the event that we have some sort of water damage incident in a building like this, would that require us to take out a loan due to the drawing on 580 during this calendar year?
I'd like to think not. I'd like to think if we were able to, we could look across the, I mean, if it was a hurricane that knocked the building down, then, I'd say that we'd be in trouble. We might have to look at something like that. But if, something along those lines, an unanticipated expense, but something that's manageable, we could probably find it in a different part of the budget.
Thank you.
I mean, there's, for instance, I just looked today, there's some money in capital outlay in 101, 112, which is lands and buildings, and that's, used for things like a boiler goes out, or, and it's part of the appropriation.
No, Member Thomas.
Just kind of a big picture question. Had the theft not occurred, where would we be budget-wise?
$210,000 over.
Okay.
Member Spielman.
One of the discussions that came out when we were talking about the tax levy was that if it didn't pass, we would lose a firefighter potentially. So now that the discussion comes from fire department operating budget would be 27,000. Now that's probably not a whole firefighter, but how is that going to be affecting? How is that going to be affecting fire operations?
Sure. So TC 200 is supplies. It's not a personnel cost. And so when we look across budgeting for an annual year, you got the different transaction classes, and so that's not out of the personnel costs. That said, there is a sunset on the increase in firefighters that we passed a couple years ago associated with the FEMA grant to provide for 3 personnel for 2 years. And we said basically that additional 3 personnel that the FEMA grant basically funded, just shy of 3 personnel for 2 years, that we would sunset those additional personnel when that 2-year period was over by attrition. I wanted to keep those 3, and had the income tax levy passed, I would have come back to you and said, hey, can we change that that legislation that sunset those 3 positions and instead, keep them on the books. But since it didn't pass, I'm not going to make that request.
Thank you.
Other elected officials, any comments on this? Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see you.
Thank you.
You're so quiet.
Well, it's just a follow-up.
Slip up on.
Follow up to Member Thomas's question about, or point of clarification about where we would be in the budget if we hadn't had the theft. I was hoping our auditor might be able to speak to what I anticipate will be a public concern about how we know that we are in a better place to prevent such thefts in the future. And I was wondering if you could offer any comment on that.
Yes, I think. We have taken several steps since that incident happened, and we've changed policies in our office, and the treasurer can tell you more about that. But as soon as we knew, we already had, we have a second set of eyes policy in our office on everything that we do. The person who does payroll prints out a proof, someone else, looks it over. Same with our tax, processes, all that kind of stuff. But it, it just didn't happen. This was a really difficult situation, and but we did change our SOP, and we've changed our form. We always had a form when somebody asked to change their banking information for an ACH. Then we asked them to fill out a form and send it back. So they did, but it was, the wrong people sending it back and all that. And so anyway, we have changed all of that process and how we do this with the bank. And I'll let Josh, because Josh as a treasurer also approves the large amounts, like, we can deal with normal amounts on a daily basis, but, and he had to be called for that one even because it was a large amount. But anyway, I'll let him explain his process.
So what we did, one thing that we did is, and it's interesting you said this just today, we had to make some payments. And in doing so, it requires a wire transfer to U.S. Bank. So one thing that we did is we came up with, again, it's a two-step process where there's a form now that we fill out. It specifically says, has anything changed in this process compared to last year? We made the same payment last December, beginning of December. It was just time to make those payments again. So again, if you looked at the form that I just did today, it would say on here, has anything changed from last year? No. Okay, proceed to step 6, right? If something's changed, then we're going to go through a whole nother set of steps. How did it change? Who verified it? How did it get verified? Basically a lot more steps to make sure that we're all on the same page. Then at the end of the day, there's 2 signatures on the page. I've done it, somebody else has checked it, we both verified we know what we're doing, and then the money gets transferred, that type of thing. Just how many steps, it's really redundant, how many steps can we add to this to make sure that whatever we do, it's done right, you know? And again, and if something gets past us at this point, these people are just so good at what they're doing, it's ridiculous.
The main step we've had to add is not a face-to-face, but a contact for the information. Instead of going by what you get in an email, then we have to use our number that we have for that bank or company and contact them and talk to someone there and make sure that they requested it. Which is, you know, what the FBI and, you know, police department, everybody recommends, if you read anything about cybersecurity, is not to just take the information that was sent to you that looks really good, but make an actual contact. We've had Josh, or asked Josh, to go, well, you know, Chase is right across the street, but to go over there and for him to contact them. He's done this already, where he's gone over there and asked about changes that were being made. So that might be the biggest one in our process.
To that point too, like the payments that were made today, we could do some things online. There are some wire amounts that we can send online. But what we've done with these, especially because they're larger, is to just go straight to the bank and we do a face-to-face transaction, because not only have we done our due diligence, but guess what? The bank does it also. Because when I go over there to do that, I'm asked 1,000 questions about that too. They want to verify the exact stuff too and make sure that everything gets done right. Again, just as many layers as we can put on this thing to make sure that any of these large payments, we know what we're doing. You know, everybody's on the same page.
Thank you.
Member Wood.
It's great to hear that you all have added to it, and I'm certainly, I think one of the things that we should all appreciate is that no matter how clever you think that you are, you're susceptible to cyber attacks and to this sort of thing. I think there should be some patience there. However, curious if we added any other cybersecurity training. Do we have any sort of external people checking our systems? Have we validated with another?
Well, we ended up hiring, so we have our own people who checked our system and didn't find any leaks in our system. But we ended up hiring through our insurance company, right, Andy, a cybersecurity expert to go through, you know, our processes, and there was nothing there. So, yeah, so we did that, and then the auditor's office and the police department got together and we held a training done by the FBI about cybersecurity. And we invited like everybody in the city or anybody who deals with any of the money or anything like that, and people from the county, EMS, anybody. We had about 50 people there for that training. And then, Andy, you can talk about like what you're doing that you've already started with our IT director.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah. So a couple different steps to answer that question. In addition to the initial check that we did with our back-of-the-house IT support that basically validated what Auditor Heck said, which is that we truly don't believe that the bad actor got in through our system. We think it got in through either the contractor or perhaps a subcontractor or somebody else to the email string. I mean, we just don't have evidence in our own system that happened. The insurance company required a third party check our system as well before they would basically release the payment for the insurance coverage that we did carry. So two different IT specialty companies looking at our own system. The additional steps we're taking internal from a IT perspective is there's a couple tools that we have, on our new Office 365. One of which is to, if you get emails from locations that you don't frequently get them, there's a setting that can be turned on that says, hey, you don't get emails from this place very often. So, that would have been a setting that potentially could have caught with a one-letter change in the name, which was the way that they perpetuated the fraud. That's a setting that we've turned on. Another one is, and this is something that's going to be unpopular and inconvenient, but we're going to have forced password resets, on like a 90-day setting. And a lot of times, you're forced to do that. It's a pain in the butt, when you do it through your maybe online services that you go where they force you to do a password reset. So we're going to do that, and we'll start probably with department heads and with folks that are regularly working in the authority finance. For them, the people that have greater access and are higher risk. Enforce those regular changes. Two-factor authentication we've already turned on. So two-factor authentication is the other big one, just from our own security perspective. Wouldn't have necessarily stopped. Neither one of those things would have necessarily stopped the particular attack that we dealt with, but it is just another layer of protection for our system. And then the last thing is we're doing our own internal forced training. So to the extent that you go to a the 50 people came and sat and had the FBI come and talk to us. Also users, once a year at their computer will be forced to go through, updated cybersecurity training. And a lot of it has to do with cyber hygiene, which really is kind of what I'm talking about with two-factor authentication and password resets and that sort of thing.
I would just add to that too, that, what we're talking about is local too. Keep in mind, the auditor just came from a conference, last week. I'll be going to a conference later this week. Any of us that go to conferences, this is a topic. It's a huge topic, and they're going to continue to update us on what's new and what's coming. Now, does that mean we can prevent everything? I don't know, but we're going to continue to get information on this topic as we go. There's no way we won't.
We notify the auditor of state and the auditors who actually audit us for the auditor of state soon after this happened also. And so they're doing their own as they audit us, which they'll be done soon, but they've looked at some of the things in our office too, and so they will continue to do that. But yeah, most of the sessions that I have at my conferences are put on by the auditor of state to help with that.
Comments from the audience? Any further comments from council? So, for Monday, you have something?
I think, yes, thank you, Pro Tem Reisner. I just wanted to interject as Chair of City and Safety Services that previously we had handled ordinances for the fire station headquarters construction through City and Safety Services. And although we wanted to have this conversation with Committee of the Whole so that all folks could be more able to participate, I would be happy to introduce legislation for the additional expenditures through City and Safety Services.
We think it's ready. Debbie and I worked at it. It's it was complicated, obviously, and so you could probably take a look later at the draft that we came up with.
Okay. And that will conclude the Committee of the Whole. We'll move on to Committee of Finance Personnel Committee. That will include myself, Member McCary, Wood, and Clotfelder. The other two members of council can sit in the audience. Okay, as I said before, we have two items. The first is 2025 staffing amend. And I will defer over to our HR person, Mr. Lucas?
Thank you, Member Reisner. So there is a proposed legislation amending ordinance 121-24, which is the 2025 staffing ordinance, removing the DEI/training coordinator position and creation of a community engagement and accessibility coordinator. This position would not be a civil service commission or civil service appointee or position. It would be a politically appointed position by the mayor.
Would you care to elaborate?
So, the position that is currently held has been very dynamic in terms of how that role has been structured since September of 2023. We actually came to council prior to the 2024 legislation to change the title. So this position, the vision is that we'll focus on our citizens to provide a framework for resources, relationship building, and engagement activities and events, which is really where the efforts of this person has led. Position will represent the city with certain commissions, so that we're ensuring that all of our community members receive the civil rights that they deserve. And community engagement is a public service, and our community expects it. And this position, as it's grown, is very apparent that need is there. So our public service that we provide to our staff or to our citizens is that their expectations of resources and events and connecting the dots between point A and point B in terms of if I have a need, where do I go? The city is involved in that, and it's not as visible as safe drinking water, and this position would specialize in that.
Member Wood?
Would this be a lateral move for the same person that's already holding that position?
Correct.
Member Clodfelder?
So based on what you said, it sounds like maybe this position previously was more internally focused on the city employees and now is going to be more public-facing? Is that a fair assessment?
Thanks, Member Clodfelder. That is a fair assessment. So when the position was created, there was a strong internal component. And being that it is a appointed position by the mayor, we suspected that there would be some changes to the position over time. And that's exactly what's happening, is that there is changes to that position over time where the initial vision had merit and we did some things, but the community pool has been strong on that position. And recognizing that and seeing the need for that public service is something that we're trying to do.
Continue.
Well, if I have understood some things I've heard correctly, it sounds like this person is going to work more with older citizens in the city and with newcomers to Athens, like people who are moving into the city, and just more of a cross-section of the population than previously. But I was wondering, what, if any, implications are there to this person if this position is now a political one? What does that designation mean for someone?
It's always been that. So
Okay.
this position, when it was created, was an appointed position by the mayor. So it's an exempt position. The mayor picks the person. There's no civil service testing process.
Okay.
There's no eligibility list. It's you select and hire.
So it does not affect the person's, like there's solidity in that job at all? Nothing has changed for that person in that respect?
Correct.
They're,
Okay.
they're at will, the same as Ron is, the same as I am.
Okay.
If the mayor didn't like the color of our shoes, he could send us packing tomorrow.
Okay, thank you. And your shoes are fine?
My shoes are okay tonight.
Member McCary?
Thank you. Just wanted to confirm that there are no expected fiscal implications of this change as far as employee benefits or salaries.
No, there are no changes.
Members of the audience, which also includes council members who are sitting there. Please take a number.
I'm Rob Delich, live on Morris Avenue here in the city, and just a comment, personal comment, I don't speak for Disabilities Commission, but I've been serving on one of their committees for a number of years now, so I've definitely heard discussion and the movement in this direction for this position to more public-facing and engaging, I think, is what I've heard a clamoring for, so I think it's the right approach, and I think it's a good move in the right direction, so. My 2 cents.
Thank you. Next.
Sylvia Skelness, 87 University Estates Boulevard, and I just thought it might be helpful for the community to hear about examples of what this person is doing now and how that's changed in some specific ways. I think that in educating the community about what this person does and the position, responsibilities, I think would be helpful. Thank you.
Thanks, Member Spielness, for the question. So this position's already pretty active externally, but some examples would be more focus on certain commissions and boards that we have. For example, the Commission on Disabilities and the Community Relations Commission. But there are some other committees or groups in the community, for example, the Family and Children First Council, that would be a council that could be engaged with housing authorities. And to reference back to a question that Member Clodfelder had regarding the type of population that we have in this city, where we have people that have been here for 20 years and we've had people that have been here for 3 months, and are going to be here for 4 or 5, right? Members from those groups of people, groups of residents, have requests or reach out to the city for resources and help with event planning and things of that nature. So does that help answer your question?
Other comments? Council members? Administration? Acting Mayor? Okay, well, we have an ordinance draft here, so Monday we'll bring it forward. One other item under Finance and Personnel is amend Ordinance 37-25, appropriate $15,588.83 to Internal Service Fund 865 for transfer. And who would be most qualified to talk? I believe the auditor would know something about this.
Thank you. So, we're amending this ordinance that we already passed to fix a clerical error, and I just can't believe that none of us caught this, line that we left out. So, the clerical error was this amount of money, the 15.5, was deposited in, we have 2 internal service funds, and it was deposited into the other internal service fund, which is internal service medical. So our process, when we move money around from one fund to another, is we have to appropriate it in the first fund, then we transfer it, and then we reappropriate it in the next fund to spend. Well, we didn't do that first one, so we have in there that we're gonna transfer it, but it's not appropriated in the transfer line for us to move it. So we're just adding that line in our process.
Okay. Is there any emergency attached to this? Can it go through the
No, I don't
normal
think
process?
so.
Okay,
Yeah, no.
so,
We just need to get that money in the right fund, but,
all right.
yeah.
Questions? From the audience? No? No? Okay. Well, thank you. We'll move forward on Monday. That concludes Finance and Personnel Committee. We now have Planning and Development Committee. Members Swank, who is absent tonight, Thomas, Wood, and Spielness. And since I'm President Pro Tem, I'm going to stay here. Which of you three?
I am.
Very good.
All right, this is a quick and easy one. Thank you. This is just a Title 49 special use of the right-of-way permit. We received for 75 Kimes Lane, and this is simply a renewal of an existing right-of-way permit that they already have. They have a 7-year use, and they're just asking for a renewal to continue using it.
Comments? Member Spielman?
I assume it's not, since we changed sign sizes and all that stuff, there's no,
I do not have any notes that it is, but I don't think they've changed the sign at all.
so it's still legal and not too big and all that kind of stuff. Okay. Pretty easy.
Comments from administration?
I think the sign's been here a long time, so we discovered that it was in the right of way and we need to do it. And I think it already had a special use of the right of way, and or previously was a, not under Title 49, it was under the revocable license, if you remember back when we did those, and then we pulled them all forward to Title 49, so I think it was one that just ultimately is getting renewed under Title 49.
Were they always 7 years? I was thinking 10, but maybe I'm mistaken.
I'll have to go back and look at Title 49. I remember 10, I think revocable license were 10, and then when we passed Title 49 and changed the name of them to special use of the right of way, we said it's 7 years.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah. I actually looked that up today because I was curious. It is 7.
7.
Or they could ask for an additional or a different time,
So,
so.
well, 7's a lucky number. So. Anything else? No. So I assume someone's going to have an ordinance ready by Monday.
I would assume.
I'll bet we do.
I'm hoping. Well, if that's all the comments for planning, all right, it's concluded. We're adjourned.